Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I am here with...
Hey, Grief Lanes and Fright Lanes, thank you for listening to another or watching another one of our cast. Anna, I feel like I'm being followed.
Uh-oh. Well, you better get out there and hook up with somebody quick so then you don't have to be followed anymore. That's right. We're talking about, that feeling after a wild night out that just won't leave you alone. None other than the film It Follows, which I personally believe should be shown in every sex ed class in every high school in the United States. Um, with that being said, we've got a little bit of body horror going on, STD identification, I guess you could say, stalking from the metaphysical side, dishonesty, hookups, teenage relationships. What else?
I think you named most of it. It's violent, it's creepy, it's a bit unnerving. And thank you for going with my not so smooth introduction. I appreciate that you rolled with those punches. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank
Made it
you.
smooth.
Yeah. So,
Yes, it
yeah,
follows.
it's definitely, added to that cautionary tale of be careful who you spend your time with because you never know what's going to happen. And the idea for me, when I was in high school and college, I was very conservative. So I would always eagerly remind my friends that anytime you have sex with somebody, you're not just sleeping with them, you're sleeping with anyone that they had slept with and that they had slept with, and so on and so forth. And I think that this film really illustrates that because essentially it is a metaphysical STD, I guess you could say, that you're getting. You get it from having sex with someone that has it, and to get rid of it, you've got to have sex with someone else to pass it on. Trouble is, if that person dies, it comes back to you, and then you got to get out there and get your mojo on again with someone else.
Yes. So, yep, a movie about STDs, about being sexually active. It also feels like a movie about the fear of aging, the fear of death, and the fear of getting old.
Mm-hmm.
Because these are young people and they are so afraid death is coming. And in the grand scheme of life, death is coming for us all. And we just don't know when. Now, and Anna and I have talked about AIDS before. This
Mm-hmm.
movie is post AIDS, so it feels like it can reflect back to that. What if you have sex with somebody and this one choice you made could
Yeah.
end your life? That happens. Again, if we go bigger, what if I get on an airplane and that engine hasn't been checked and then that's the day I die? So it's the sense that death is always lurking
Mm-hmm.
somewhere.
Absolutely. And I think part of it too is, as you touch on the age of the characters in the movie, I think that your reputation is a big thing, especially when you're an adolescent. And the idea of constantly having to look over your shoulder because of the actions that you've taken, right? Because your reputation follows you. No matter how hard you try to get rid of it or to change it, it's still going to follow you, at least throughout the 4 years you're in high school or college or whatever it is, right? So we're programmed, we're told these things. And it's just something that we're brought up to be mindful of. And I think that translates into real world life too. When you grow up and you get a career and you're working and you're trying to make space for yourself in whatever industry you end up in, or even to change what you're doing as your career, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even your 70s. Now, people are still working into their 70s. How do you do that? Because you have this reputation that's followed you. And looking at things in the broader sense, to me, that's really what that symbolized, right? So here we have this action or this behavior that we commit. We get this reputation. We try to give that action or behavior away so that the reputation is posted on someone else. But still, in the background, it's following us. We still feel it. We still see it. We still embody it to some extent. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that take?
I love that take, right? That our reputation follows us. And I love how you also touch on the immediacy. When we are adolescents, our reputation feels like everything. And then it follows us regardless of if other people know it's following us. So in the movie, we know the people that it's following that have
Mhm.
had, that have this metaphysical illness now, and how often we assume because in my adolescence I was this way. So now as I get older, everybody else is going to know that I
Right.
did this, and we hold ourselves hostage with it.
Mhm.
Where other people are like, oh, you're an awesome person. I didn't know that about you. Look at like reformed gang members, reformed racists, like all these people that
Mhm.
they were in a place in their life. This is what they had access to. And then through education, through experience, they're like, oh, I was really led this way. People that were brought up extremely religious, they'll be like, I was so narrow minded,
Yeah.
and this reputation was everything. We beat ourselves up, and we're like,
Mhm.
oh. And then I learned, and then I grew. And so I get to say, this is me now, and this is actually part of how I got here.
Absolutely. And, it's funny because the film gives you these stereotype characters from high school. And I feel so terrible saying this, but when Jay decides to have sex with Paul, my immediate reaction was she can't have sex with him because he's like the nerdy sidekick best friend. No one else is going to want to have sex with him. He's going to die. And then, of course, we find out that he solicits Lady of the Night, and it all kind of works out. Hopefully, I would think she probably passes it on pretty quickly before she even knows she has it. So, there's that. But it's funny that we have these characters in our mind, and we react to it in that way as well.
Yes, and you bring up two very valid and important points in this movie. One, how quickly an STD can travel, how quickly illness, we could even look at COVID, how quickly
Mhm.
something can travel depending on our proximity to other bodies.
Yes.
And how Jay chooses to have sex with Paul, how he's going to sacrifice himself. Well, he also had a crush on her for a really long time, so he's
Mhm.
wanted this, which leads me to a question. If you knew you were infected, if you knew that you got this metaphysical illness or whatever, we could
Mhm.
bring it into the real world, would you knowingly have sex with somebody? Would you knowingly pass them something knowing that now you've just killed them?
That's a really good question. So I think it's a double-sided answer for me. And I was really thinking about this because initially I was thinking about it to myself. I'm like, okay, well, if I got it, I could just find a list of people that have done really bad things and have sex with them because, I don't care if they die. And I know that sounds cold and callous and terrible.
No, I love that Dexter point of view. That kind of like, if
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt somebody, so why don't I go ahead? It's
Yeah.
like that vigilante
Right. But
mentality
like,
that you're,
yeah,
yeah.
but then we know that they've done horrible, despicable things. What if they go out and they hurt someone else and then they end up with it? And that's like an innocent life that you don't want to be affected. But on the other hand, if I choose not to do it, then I'm going to die. But then the person that had sex with me is going to die too, or they're going to pass it to someone else. So it's kind of a darned if you do and darned if you don't type of situation. And I'm also curious the history of this metaphysical STD, why it exists, why it's doing what it does, because we don't really find that out. Apparently, they're making a sequel, so maybe we'll find out more. But what would you do? Would you pass it on, or would you kind of keep it and try and navigate life?
I would keep it. I would try to navigate life. I feel like it would probably give me new perspective, knowing that I was dying, knowing that I
Mhm.
was going to have to. We can think about people with chronic illness or people with terminal
Yeah.
illness. They know that they're dying. They know that
Mhm.
it's coming for them. And so then oftentimes people are more mindful. Am I taking my medications? How am I being safe? How,
Mhm.
or we see people that are like, I'm dying, so I'm gonna spend all my money. I'm gonna do these things. I'm really gonna engage in life and live
Yeah.
life because now I know I'm not gonna live. I don't think in good consciousness I could go dying knowing I've given it to all these people and all these people are giving it to people.
Right.
Because if we stopped, if everybody who's gotten this illness just stopped having sex, then it would be gone and we wouldn't have to
Mhm.
worry
Yeah.
about anybody else having to get it. Because it'd be like, okay, if I have this, I cannot have sex with anybody.
Right. Well, and I did wonder too, like, what if two people that have had it and passed it on, what if they hook up? Like, what happens then? Does it totally go away? Right? Maybe it's like this opposite effect. So I don't know.
That's a good question. I don't know, or does it just mean nothing?
Yeah.
Because
Is
the whole
it,
point of it is to replicate, it's to
yeah.
continue.
Right. Is it like if you put two negatively charged ions together or, I don't know. It's food for thought.
Well, if it's a virus, I would think like
Yeah.
if the
Mutate,
ring,
maybe.
that's
Yeah.
about the virus, right? It's
Yeah.
about how does a virus
Hmm.
continue
To kind of
create.
evolve and spread and mutate. And yeah, when we're looking at reality, COVID, as you mentioned, that's an example. There are all these new variants that come out, and, perhaps the disease and it follows varies and shifts and changes. The appearance does, we know that much. Um,
Yes.
so
Which one
that,
did you find like out of its appearance? Was there like one of those appearances where you're like, that is scary. That is, and it would take on people too. Like it would
yeah.
pretend to be a loved one. And then it
Hmm.
had some other manifestations that were.
Or super bizarre. I think for me, it was more of like the naked man on the roof, just because they're like pulling out to leave and go. And it's like, oh, there's a naked man on the roof. It was just more surprising to me than anything. Like, oh, okay, that's not really something I want to walk out and see in the morning. It's just really any random person on my roof, whether they're clothed or not, that just would be very alarming to me. What about you?
And you bring up a really good point about the nudity. Like a lot of these killer entities are naked,
Yeah.
really forcing people to wrestle with that vulnerability, with that
Hmm.
nakedness being exposed. I'm gonna have to say the tall man, just because he just
Yeah.
seems so overwhelming, like
Hmm.
almost like you couldn't escape him because he just had this presence.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one that was weirdest, I think, to me, though, not most disturbing, but just like that's weird, was when it was in Greg's house and it was his mom. That was just strange, like knocking
And
on.
she, yeah, and she straddled him and then
Yeah.
peed on him. I was like,
Yeah.
what is the significance of? Is this for shock or is there significance? Because
Yeah,
we
like
know this is
marking the
about.
territory, but then it's like he dies, so there's nothing really to establish like I've been here. You know what I mean? It was
Do you
just
think it's
very.
teaching?
Hmm?
Like it's his mom,
Yes.
right? So do you feel like her peeing on him is almost like this? When we get older, how we start to like lose our ability to control our bladder, our bowels, a lot of things because there is this sense of
Hmm.
like youth is forever. So I'm wondering if
Yeah,
that's why she pees
maybe.
on him and she had to straddle him to pee. It was, yeah,
It
I'm
was
with you. It was
very.
a bizarre scene.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thought when the straddling happened, she would shift into something else, and it would be like a Frankenhooker type moment. It was not that. And so I just thought that was very, very odd without a context as to the meaning. Yeah.
Maybe dominance, like I'm
Hmm.
straddling you, I have dominance
Yeah, definitely. We
over
do
you.
we hear stories of someone being urinated or defecated on in an abuse situation, and the person performing that vile act is asserting their dominance. So perhaps it was really an interpretation of that.
Listeners, watchers, if you have an interpretation, please share with
Yeah,
us what you think of this scene and what you made of this very interesting
absolutely. Yeah.
scene. Because the movie is well thought out. So
Mm-hmm.
when I was like, is it for shock? Usually when people put things in horror movies for
Mm-hmm.
shock, often like that doesn't fit, that doesn't feel right, because I'm like, oh, you just threw this
Yeah,
in here to give us a jump scare or to give us a shock, unless it's a
right.
creator. Like you've heard Anna and I talk about Eli Roth. He is somebody that he's going in
Yeah.
to shock you. So you know, like he's gonna pull out the stop slasher movies. They are going in to shock you. They're not
Yeah.
giving you this story for you to be like, what did I watch? What is the message? What is the
Mm-hmm.
social meaning in this?
Absolutely. And really to talk about that scene a little bit more, if you find yourself in a situation where you are being with having intimacy with someone, and their behaviors are not in line with what you've discussed in terms of your preferences, and, you know, things are happening that are not aligned with what you want to do, you have every right to say no, thank you. No. Always remember, as a participant, that no means no. It is important to have safe words and really effective communication prior to intimate acts. And always keep that in mind if you have been in any sort of relationship where behaviors were very dominant, feeling and uncomfortable. There are supports and services out there for you as well.
Yes, seek those support, seek those services. And to piggyback on what Anna is saying, no means no. And that does not have to be verbal, right? And we can, like, talking about knowingly you having an illness and having sex with somebody, that is a form of violence in a
Mhm.
relationship. If I know I have an STD and I don't tell my partner or use a condom, I have I have violated
Absolutely.
his consent. And so as Anna's talking about consent, no is verbal, no can be with your body language.
Hmm.
So often in my work, right, it breaks my heart when I work mostly with women, and this happens to men too. This happens to
Hmm.
trans people. This happens regardless of your gender. I didn't say no because there are situations where we can't say no. So we're moving our body to indicate we're trying to get to the door. We're like, hey, I'll call you later. There's all these ways that we are trying to do things, and how the attacker then manipulates it. Well, you kissed me. And oftentimes, as people, we're like, okay, if I kiss you, then you'll let me leave. So I'm just going to kiss you. Or a lot
Hmm.
of people are like, well, you kissed me, therefore you want to have sex. No. So even if you're listening and you're confused on signs, which happens, people can kiss you and not want to have sex. Little side note, have you started to watch Greek Life? It's a new show, it's a documentary. This broke my heart. It's about fraternities and sororities and the abuse that happens. And they were showing this fraternity, and they were chanting, no means yes and yes means anal. So like just this horror. And so and sometimes as people, we end up being hurt and violated because that's our only way to survive. So I want to validate that for you, not to beat yourself up. Then you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, you call the police, you get yourself a therapist, you do other things, because nobody has a right to violate your consent.
Absolutely. Yeah. And really, we talk more about the collegiate experience in one of our previous episodes related to the film Promising Young Women. If you are struggling with some sort of experience in relation to being in a sorority or a fraternity, or your high school or college experience, or even an experience in the workplace, I would invite you to listen to that podcast. There are some really great tools and tips and resources mentioned in that podcast for you as well. You are not alone. And as Margaret said, we see so many female identifying persons as victims. Even in this film, It Follows, we see our protagonist or our victim, Jay, as a female facing person. If you are male facing or masculine facing, that does not make you any less of a person or who you are. If something has happened to you, some sort of sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, it happens to a very wide variety of people. It does not make you less of a person. You have just as much right to be heard and to seek support and services to navigate your healing journey. And don't ever forget that. We really want to make sure that you know that, and that there are people out there who care and people out there that can help you and resources for you.
Yes, 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 yes. And even as Anna was speaking, the first person that gives Jay the illness, Hugh, his consent was violated. He had sex with a girl he met at the bar, and he just thought he was having a one-night stand.
Yeah.
So there's, just seek help, and you are not alone, and this is not your fault. And movies like It Follows, Promising Young Woman, Gerald's Game, these movies often bring up that underbelly of society and what is sexual assault, emotional abuse, what is consent. And I hope that these movies do that to start a conversation so people can start to look at how do we change these norms and give voice to all the people that have had this experience.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And, talking about just human sexuality in general, there is nothing wrong with learning about your sexuality, experiencing it, and taking actions related to that. The main thing to keep in mind is behaviors need to be consensual. You need to protect yourself. You need to protect your partner or partners as well. It's an expectation. It's not an option anymore. And it should never have been an option before, to be honest. It should have always been an expectation.
Yes. Well said. Well said. And so if you're listening, hopefully that's your takeaway. You're not alone. You have voice. And how do you start to have relationships where this is a requirement? This is an expectation. This isn't an option. You're going to treat me, my body, my emotions, my thoughts with respect. You don't get to assault me or violate my consent. That's not okay.
Yes. Very well said. I agree completely. So I do have to ask, who do you relate to most in the movie, Margaret?
I was going to ask you. I am going to have to say, it's all good. Yara, right? She is kind of that nerdy friend of Jay's sister, Kelly. She has that really cool pre-flip phone that she's always reading on and researching on. I feel like that would be me. I'd be like, hey, I learned this about this, or maybe this can help. How about you?
I feel like probably what's he called? Hugh, his mom, who's just like, oh, hi kids, come on in, no idea anything's going on. Just being like, oh, my kid has friends, that's cool, just living life. Because I guess for me, I was definitely kind of the friend that was like, you shouldn't be doing these things, you should respect yourself and that kind of stuff. So I suppose I was a little Miss Goody Goody. I guess I still kind of am in some ways. So probably just the mom, because I was always the mom of the group. Yeah. But that's okay, right? Everyone needs
the mom of the group.
Yeah, every group needs a mom. Every group needs all these different characters, right? So that's what makes us unique and diverse and fun.
Yes.
Yes. So eventually, I guess whenever, if and when the sequel comes out, we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll learn more about this metaphysical STD and how it all got started and those sorts of things. But until then, we'll have to keep guessing and, you know, keep looking over your shoulder just in case.
Shoulder, be
Cool.
careful.
Anyway, you guys keep drinking the Bruja brew, eating your coffin cookies, and until next time, we'll see you around. Bye.
Thanks for listening.